Today we're talking about spooky things. Do you believe in ghosts? I think most people are probably very skeptical about the idea of ghosts until something happens to them that makes them into a believer. And I'm going to tell you about that instance for me. It was like 2007, and I was traveling with my best friend Jenny. It was her and her family, so it was like her and her parents, and then our other friend Jessica. And we were going to New Orleans as just like a vacation. Their family was taking a vacation there, and then they invited me and our other friend Jessica to kind of just like come along. So it was our first time there. We stayed in the French Quarter. We stayed at this hotel called the Place d'Armes in what is considered a very haunted part of New Orleans. And when we get there, I noticed that there's like a sign on the desk that says something about the hotel being haunted. And so we talked to the front desk about this claim, and they're saying, yeah, we have a lot of guests who claim that there's a lot of paranormal activity. Just be aware of that. And it made it seem like they were almost like hyping it up as like a perk, like, ooh, like you never know what's gonna happen. And I think it might have even been a part of like one of those ghost tours where they like stop in front of the building and they're like, this place is haunted. But they do that in a lot of places where it almost seems like they're turning it into a commercial thing, where maybe they want to say that to get more attention, to get more people to come through. So I didn't really think anything of it. We get our room. I share a room with my friend Jenny and our friend Jessica, so it's three of us. So we get our room and we're just kind of exploring the hotel. They say there are some people who can go into a room and just like feel an energy shift. And I think that I've experienced that a lot in my life, especially when I was like a kid, and just like a lot younger, where I would get really uneasy feelings just walking into a room, especially old buildings. I would feel like, I don't know if I would call it a presence, but it's definitely an energy shift that I notice. So I started feeling that as we were walking around this building, and we were told by, I can't remember who it was, but basically the idea behind the history of this hotel was that it used to be an orphanage, and at one point the orphanage had a fire, and I believe like some of the children ended up passing away in the fire, and then after that it was used to like house sick people who had like either yellow fever or tuberculosis. I'm probably butchering the entire history of this place, but again, just like the rest of the French Quarter, this specific hotel had a dark history involving children specifically. So we ended up leaving to go to dinner, and then we came back that night. And, it was late, and we were all really tired, so we all went to bed. I was in bed, sharing a bed with my friend Jenny, and then friend Jessica was in the next bed. And then a few hours later, it must have been like 4:30 or maybe even 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up because I felt the sheets like sliding off of me like this. And I was just like half asleep, and I could just feel the sheets just like running down my body. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. Like, the blanket and the sheets are falling off. So not even really thinking about it because I was half asleep, I like sat up and I like barely opened my eyes, and I could see the entire blanket just fall off, just slide off the end of the bed. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that happens. And I bent over and I picked the edge of the blanket up and pulled it up and like laid back down, and I pulled it like to my chest, and I closed my eyes and I started to fall asleep again. But then I felt the sheets start tugging, like like someone was grabbing the other side of it and was like pulling on it. And in my head I was like, oh, this isn't happening. And so I just like grabbed it as tight as I could and started pulling back the other way, and I could feel the sheets pulling away from me. And I was just kind of, again, in a state of like, this can't be happening. This isn't real. So then I pulled it as hard as I could, like over my head. And then all of a sudden, the sheets completely ripped away and flew off the bed. And my friend next to me sat up, and I sat up, and the blanket was on the floor. And we both looked at each other and we were like, what the hell was that? And we literally jumped out of bed and ran out the door, ran out the room, and left our poor friend Jessica there so that she could be, taken by the demon or whatever it was. We went out into the courtyard. We like ran out there and just like stayed there and refused to go back into the room. I think for maybe like an hour or something. But my friend and I were so freaked out because we both experienced it. It wasn't like, a lot of people have these experiences where they're like, oh, my eyes are playing tricks on me, or like I had this weird thing that happened and it's just them. But for me, it was also my friend was there. She also experienced the same thing, and she was also freaked out by it. And so I feel like that's very significant in that we both experienced this super weird thing together. I'm like, there's no way that was just like a draft, or it was actual force. Like I was grabbing onto something and something else was pulling it away from me. It wasn't like, oh, this is just like a heavy blanket that's just falling to the ground. It was like force that was releasing and then pulling and then releasing and pulling. I was literally playing like tug of war with something that I could not see. Maybe it was like a hotel worker underneath our bed playing a prank on us because they wanted to like perpetuate this whole story about the hotel being haunted. But I don't think so. It was so terrifying, and it was crazy in that it like kept happening. Like it pulled the blanket off of us once, and then it did it again in like a really big way. And I just don't know how that can't be just like a weird blip, So I'd say that was like the one instance that I was like, oh, there's absolutely energy, or like I don't even want to call it like a ghost, but there's definitely something going on here that we don't understand, that I don't understand, that my friend, like we don't have a word for it. It's not something that we can identify, but there's definitely something happening, and there's definitely something there that's physical, because we felt it and we saw it. And it also reminds me of, maybe it's like this specific friend and I, we had another instance where this was at my house, my parents' house. We were walking through my parents' dining room into the kitchen, and as we were walking through the dining room, I hear a voice say, "Come, Watson," in like a British accent. And I turned to my friend and I'm like, "What? What do you mean, come, Watson? What does that mean?" And she's like, "I didn't say that. I thought you said that." And I'm like, "I don't, what? No, I didn't say anything. What does that even mean?" And we looked around and it kind of sounded like it came from like above our heads. The room had like a high ceiling, but like there is nothing. We were the only people in the house. There was the TVs weren't on, like the lights weren't even on. Like nothing was plugged in, and it was just so. It was like this disembodied voice that came down from the ceiling, and the room above where the dining room was would have just been my bedroom, which also kind of freaked me out. And I like didn't sleep in my room that often because I got the heebie-jeebies from it. But that was also another like shared experience where my friend and I were together and we heard this thing and we were both like, huh? We were both so confused by it because it was so weird. And we never figured out what it was. We never figured out what it was. It said, "Come, Watson." Which also reminds me of another story where, kind of in a similar way, where it's like two people walking through someone's house. This was my boyfriend at the time. We were young. We were maybe like 16, and I was at his house. He had it was like a really long house, and we were walking. I don't know where I started from, but I remember just kind of like seeing him out of the corner of my eye and like following him into one of the guest rooms. And I followed him like down the hall and into the room, but when I got there, there was no one in there. And I was just like, "Hey, where'd you go?" And I didn't hear any response. And I looked like in the bathroom and I'm like, "That's so weird. I literally just followed him in here, but there's no one in here." And then I went back into the hallway and then I walked into the living room and he was in the living room, which is in the opposite part of the house. And I was like, "Weren't you just in the bedroom, the guest room?" And he was like, "What are you talking about? I've just been sitting here on the couch." And I was just like, "No, I just followed you into the guest room. You were just walking down there." And he's like, "No, you didn't. I've been sitting here." And there was nobody else like in his family home at the time. We were the only ones there. And I was just like, I swear to God, I was following a walking person down the hallway into this room. So then I just kind of dismissed it as like some weird thing in my brain that tricked me into thinking that there is a person. But I swear it was like, I feel like he was even wearing the same clothing. But I've had like so many things like that have happened to me, that I am just like, was that real life? Did that actually happen? And they did, but because I don't have any like explanation for them, I kind of like push them out of my mind. And I think it just like, because my mind doesn't have like it's not able to like reason with what happened, it like tries to forget that it happened. But it's happened to me several times. It used to happen to me a lot when I was younger. And I used to be really into the idea of like, ooh, like there are probably things that we don't see. There's energies that exist with us that we don't understand and that we're not able to perceive. But it also gave me like a lot of anxiety because I feel like the more I thought about it, the more those things would happen to me. And so as I've gotten older, I've stopped thinking about them. And maybe some people will say, like, I've closed myself off to those things. So now I don't experience them as much. And I can't really think of the last time I've had something like that happen. But, they say the more open you are to things, the your channel gets like you're like contacted more or whatever. What would happen if I really leaned into it? What would happen if I like opened my channel up? Actually, let's ask Gemini if they believe in ghosts. Is there proof that ghosts exist? Gemini says, it's one of the oldest debates in human history. It depends on who you ask. Scientist, paranormal investigator, or person who just saw a shadow move in a locked room, you'll get very different answers. There is no scientific proof that ghosts exist, but there is an abundance of anecdotal evidence that explain why we see them. This is interesting. Infrasound. Research has shown that low frequency sounds below 20 hertz, often caused by wind or machinery, can cause humans to feel dread, chills, or even see gray shapes in their peripheral vision due to the vibrations affecting the fluid in the eye. Okay, that I've actually never heard that before. That certain frequencies can make you feel dread or see certain things out of the corner of your eye. But I'm trying to think of like what that would be, or like why that would occur like in my friend's house, because there's like nothing on, I mean, there could be, maybe it comes from like a refrigerator or something, who knows. If a ghost can move an object or make a sound, it must be composed of matter to apply force. So thinking about the ghosts that played tug of war with me, with the sheets, with the blankets, should be made of matter, right? And matter is detectable by sensors, which has yet to happen in a repeatable, peer-reviewed environment. Okay. Let's talk about when paranormal investigators use tools to gather evidence, and like, what kind of merit does that have, right? The EMF meters detect shifts in electromagnetic fields. The scientific explanation is that most hits come from faulty wiring, appliances, or cell towers. Okay, I can see that. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. Pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns like words in random noise. I know that there's a bunch of like EVP apps that you can download, but they're like apps that are designed, they're not really using real radio waves. So I don't really trust those apps because you could just program them to say anything. I'm very skeptical on that, on the EVPs. Okay, here we go. Why we see ghosts. Why do millions of people claim they've encountered them? Psychologists point to several fascinating phenomena. Sleep paralysis. Okay, I'm going to do a whole different video on sleep paralysis because I have lots of experience with sleep paralysis, and that's for a whole nother conversation. But let's take that out of the equation, and because sleep paralysis is basically like where the idea is that you're caught in a state between waking and sleeping, where your brain is like in REM sleep, where it's hallucinating things. But in my case, because there was another person there in the bed with me experiencing the same thing, you can't say that that's sleep paralysis because we're not both hallucinating the same thing, and we were both awake. Toxicology. In the early 20th century, many haunted houses are actually suffering from carbon monoxide leaks, which causes hallucinations. Okay, fair enough. I don't think I was suffering from carbon monoxide leaks. Okay, the power of suggestion. People are much more likely to report paranormal activity in a building if they are told beforehand that it's haunted. Okay, sure, that's true. That could be true, but how could that explain the actual physical thing that happened? Okay, there are few documented phenomena where physical objects can move in ways that seem impossible or ghostly. Static electricity and tension. If a blanket is heavily layered, static electricity can build up. When a person shifts in their sleep, the tension can reach a breaking point where the blanket slides or snaps away from the body. I don't think so, man. I can see it that being like a subtle thing. We've all had experiences with like static electricity, right? It's like it's not like a strong force. This you should have seen this blanket completely rip out of my hands multiple times, or it like pulled away multiple times. Microseismic activity or building settling, vibrations, the slide. Once a blanket starts to slide, gravity takes over. Because blankets are flexible, they don't always lie flight, blah, blah, blah. I don't think so. Drafts and air pressure. This wasn't a lightweight blanket. This was like a heavy blanket because this was, I think, in the middle of winter too. Like New Orleans gets a little bit chilly. If your home has a certain frequency vibrating through the floorboards or bed frame, it can cause fabrics to crawl or shift suddenly. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Okay, so then why did I see like a shadow person? Why do, why did I see a shadow person and follow them into a different room? That's a classic shadow person encounter. See, classic. It happens so much that it can be classic. When you see a dark humanoid figure that seems to flee or lead you elsewhere, there are several factors that can usually explain why our brains create that specific image. Okay, our peripheral vision is highly sensitive to motion, but very poor at detail and color. It's designed to alert us to potential predators. Okay, so our peripheral vision is wired to detect movement, and that can register as a moving shape. When you turn your head to look directly at it, a shadow seems to dart into the other room. In reality, your central vision takes over. The optical illusion disappears, making it look like the figure moved out of sight. Then there's like lucid dreaming and hypnomorphic states. When your brain is transitioning to REM sleep, which this was in the middle of the day. I was awake and walking around, so I wasn't in REM sleep. Sense of presence. Neurologists have discovered that stimulating a specific part of the brain can trigger an intense sense of presence, which is what I've felt a lot when I was younger. So if this area is overstimulated, your brain can fail to distinguish between self and other. It projects your own body's presence into the room as a separate shadow figure. Huh? What? That's crazy. When you move toward it, the projection moves away, creating the sensation of a chase. What? That's a thing? That's wild. We be projecting ourselves into the room and we be following it, thinking it's something else. That is the wildest thing I've ever heard. Wait, I kind of want to like, what is this called? Wait, temporoparietal junction. What the hell is that? It says here that damage to this area is linked to disorders such as schizophrenia and Alzheimer's. It's also associated with out-of-body experiences, which I've had before. Stimulation of this part of the brain can induce the illusion of a shadow person, a shadowy humanoid figure that mimics a person's bodily movements or feels like a nearby presence. It says when this area is electrically stimulated, it can cause the brain to project a body double or shadow into the surrounding space. So you can perceive that there's a shadowy person behind you, often mirroring your own posture, such as standing, sitting, or leaning. Studies show that stimulating this can cause a patient to feel a shadow figure embracing them. This is wild. This is wild. Wow, there's like a whole scientific article about shadow people on science.org. Okay, so what I've gathered is that, well, I haven't really been able to explain the whole like blanket thing, other than maybe we were both experiencing carbon monoxide poisoning, which I don't think happened. It could have been static electricity, which I don't think it was. It could have been an earthquake, which I don't think it was. Or it could have been like a hotel worker underneath the bed pulling the sheets down, which I don't think it was. So that still is pretty unexplained. The shadow person thing could potentially be this thing with my TPJ region of my brain being overstimulated and me thinking that I'm seeing someone when I'm not actually. Have you guys ever seen a shadow person? Have you guys ever been to New Orleans and experienced something super weird? Have you ever had the blankets pulled off of you twice in a row by something you couldn't see? Thank you for going down this hole with me. Keep your TPJs in shape. Let me know your guys' stories. I would love to hear them. Bye.